With only 5 games left in the regular season, the Anaheim Ducks are firing on all cylinders. The number 1 team in the NHL has clinched a playoff berth and looks to wrap up another Pacific Division title as they turn their sights on the playoffs. Tonight in New Jersey, the Ducks look to end their road trip on a winning note before heading back to SoCal. Ducks and Devils next. They call it The Rock in downtown Newark, New Jersey, the Prudential Center, also the house that Lou built, the home of the New Jersey Devils, who play host tonight to the Anaheim Ducks. It is literally the end of the road trip, if you will. John Ollers and Brian Hayward, glad to have you along on this Sunday evening. What a difference a couple of days and a couple of games makes in the NHL world as the Ducks lost the first 2 games of this road trip, and now things seem to be settling down.
It can be a roller coaster ride at times, but right now the head coach is very pleased. The last 2 games for the Ducks have been very good games that look like a team that are preparing for the postseason. They've cleaned up their acts in the defensive zone, and their goaltending has been really good.
Well, prepare for the postseason they should, because with the win yesterday afternoon against the Islanders, they clinched their 11th playoff berth in franchise history and their 3rd straight. It's just a matter of time before they take their 3rd straight division title as well. That means they'll probably be looking at the wild card teams, and all of a sudden a new development. The Chicago Blackhawks have stumbled into one of those 2 wild card positions. Calgary still very much in the mix, battling it out with Los Angeles as well. Dallas and San Jose clinging to playoff opportunities.
Johnny, there is a lot to be happy about right now for Bruce Boudreau and his club. The 3rd consecutive playoff berth, as you mentioned. This is a team that expected not obviously to be part of the postseason, but for 103 points, most in the National Hockey League. I don't know that they expected that, but they've worked hard and they put themselves in a great position, and they've been a very good road team all season long. 23 road wins, the 2nd most in the National Hockey League. Andrew Cogliano, dangerous the other night. He scores a goal on the breakaway. 48 wins, more wins than any other team in the league. So yes, this is a team that's feeling pretty darn good about themselves. And when you talk to the players, they're not resting on their laurels. This is about continuing to build and get better and get ready for a couple of weeks from now when the playoffs start.
Well, they've won 2 straight coming into this one here tonight against the Devils, and part of the reason has been their goaltending, and that is the source of tonight's Guts and Glory, brought to you by Ram Trucks.
Well, it's very interesting. Now Frederik Andersen has kind of thrown down the gauntlet and said, I want to be the guy in the playoffs. In his last 2 games, I think he's been sensational. There was a moment in that Islander game that I thought to myself, there's only a couple of goaltenders in the NHL that could have made that sequence of back-to-back stops. So the challenge tonight for John Gibson is not to be good. He's going to have to be great if he's going to keep his name in the hunt and under consideration to be the Ducks playoff starter. And Gibson knows that. And I said in our pregame show, both goaltenders very supportive of one another, but this is about competitiveness, and both of these goaltenders want to be the guy tapped on the shoulder by Bruce Boudreau when the playoffs start. So it'll be interesting to see how John Gibson responds tonight.
The story in the Eastern Conference is it's still a battle for the final playoff spots. However, that does not include tonight's opponent, the Devils.
Well, it's interesting. The Boston Bruins are a team that are battling to stay in. The Ottawa Senators are actually losing to the Florida Panthers right now. So that's a tremendous battle. The Devils are in a rebuild mode. It's been a long time since they've been a factor in the postseason, and I don't think that they're going to be in the playoff picture for a number of years right now.
Anaheim, in fact, can mathematically eliminate the Devils with a victory here tonight at Prudential Center. Just 5 games away is Corey Perry from leading the Ducks in goal scoring for the 5th straight year. That despite missing 15 games due to injury this season. It's the Ducks and Devils next. Anaheim Ducks hockey is brought to you by Hyundai. Visit your Hyundai dealer to take advantage of our March sales event special offers on Elantra and Sonata. Back in Newark, New Jersey, the Prudential Center, the home of the New Jersey Devils. 2nd and final meeting of the season between the Ducks and Devils. In fact, it'll be the final game against an Eastern Conference foe this season for Anaheim. Ducks fans hope they will play again against the East. Of course, that would mean they were in the Stanley Cup final. Long way to go before that could be the case. However, now it's time for tonight's Honda Keys of the game. And for those, we go to Kent French on the Anaheim bench with assistant coach Trent Yawney.
Johnny, thank you, Trent. Fourth consecutive game with a different defensive pairing. What are you hoping to see tonight and down the stretch going to help you make a decision with those pairings?
Well, Des and Wiz have played together before, and Cam and Sammy have played together before. So at this time of year, you never know what you're going to have. I think it's a good thing for us to be getting used to other guys, and they've done a really good job with each pair that they played with.
Trent, thank you.
You bet.
Johnny, back up to you.
Thank you, Kent. You take the morning skate, and they tell you you're not going to play, but they tell you to be ready. Well, that's the case tonight for Tomas Fleischmann. Fleischmann was scheduled to be a healthy scratch, but we are told a lower body injury, Brian, to Matt Bolesky in the warm-up. Fleischmann gets tapped. All of a sudden, he's in.
You got to be ready. And the Ducks only had a couple of players actually skate this morning for the first time in a long, long time that I can remember. It was a morning off for virtually everyone, John. And the guys at this time of the year, of course, the focus is on getting their rest. Anaheim, by the way, will not return home to Southern California immediately following the game, which is normally the case. They've decided to stay in New Jersey after the game tonight. And again, the concern is that the players, they want to make sure they get a good night's sleep with the postseason looming.
Oh, wow. A rather generous icing call. Looked like Sakic was right on the center red line as that pass from Getzlaf ricocheted off his skate and went all the way down. So Clayton Stoner also out with a lower body injury for tonight's game. That means Hampus Lindholm draws back in. He actually gets the start, and he's out there right now. Lindholm paired with Francois Beauchemin again on defense, with him out yesterday against the Islanders. That constituted some shuffling of the defense pairs for Anaheim. Severson does not get his shot through off the right point, and now Anaheim will get their first change of the game as he has to chase back into his own zone. In on the forecheck, Camilleri, as the Ducks rim it around and away from that pressure. Trying to glove it down and move forward with it is Stefan Matteau, just recalled from Albany about a week ago. This is just his second game of the season.
Well, you can see that Kessler's matchup tonight, it's going to involve Zajac and Camilleri. They're the two big dangerous weapons in the Devils lineup. Good stop there on the shot by Merrill, that comes in, snared easily with the left hand of John Gibson. Big line out for the Devils, and Merrill's just going to whip this one. Sammy Vatanen does not screen his goaltender and allows John Gibson to get a pretty good look at that.
Face-off will be to the right of Gibson, who last started on Tuesday at Columbus. He appeared in that game against the Jackets in what was eventually a 5-3 Anaheim loss. Gibson in that game made 22 saves. The fifth goal was an empty net goal. 22nd appearance of the year for Gibson, who has 12 wins on his resume so far. And he'll look at a face-off to his right. Nate Thompson, who was nails against the Islanders, won 7 of 9 yesterday. Loses that draw, however, but then blocks a shot out of play.
And James Wisniewski and Simon Dupre have played together already. Wisniewski hasn't been here all that long, so it'll be interesting to see that pair. Wisniewski, the right-handed shot, Dupre, the left-handed shot. The Ducks are able to go righty-lefty, should they so choose, moving into the postseason.
Just a minute and a half into it as Dupre chases in his own zone, and Steve Bernier tries to knock it down in center. He does. Gomez hinges it back. Peter Harold draws back in to Lou Lamoriello's lineup tonight, and he'll play it across. Harold had been a healthy scratch in each of the last 3 games, and this puck just out of his reach will come all the way back into the Devils' zone. Eric Jelena is there to get it. And Jelena bumped by Silverberg, who takes it away. Gets the cycle going with Pat Maroon. Maroon turns into the circle. Got it to Silverberg, who whipped it right on. Schneider hangs on.
That's a good stop by Corey Schneider. Good positional save. Jakob Silverberg doesn't waste any time. Watch when this puck gets on his stick. He's just going to spin and release immediately. And what he's hoping is that he's catching the goaltender moving. That was a great angle because you could see that the goaltender was set. Both edges of those skate blades into the ice allowed him to drop down and take away the 5-hole quickly.
Wagner takes the draw in the circle to the left of Schneider, and the Devils come back with it, but the entry batted away from Jordan Tutu. Nice play by Lindholm, who just swatted it out of midair.
Oh, what a hit
And it's Wagner who delivers the hit, sending a Devils player into the photo box in between the benches. That was John Merrill.
Just crushed Merrill.
Well, Wagner certainly made an impression. This is just his 6th appearance this season for Anaheim, but he's playing in his 3rd straight game. He's got 10 hits in the last 3 games he's played for Anaheim, and he got a real big one there on Merrill. 2-2 trying to center, but it's broken up, and Lindholm just lifts it over the stick of Tutu and around the far boards, held in. And Tutu in the high slot has it knifed away by Wagner, who's falling, and then is able to get it ahead for Thompson.
And Ruutu then took a little run at Chris Wagner, so lots of contact here in the early going. Bruce Boudreau was talking about Wagner and some of those big hits that he's delivered since being recalled from Norfolk. It's just energized his bench, according to the coach.
Well, you got to figure there's a little bit of a target on number 62 now. And it was a real tone setter there. Andy Green whips it out of the zone. The ice time leader for the Devils had it knocked down just as it came outside the line, and Zubers tried to deliver a hit of his own as he had Vatanen pinned to the boards. Ducks keep it in, but only momentarily. 2-on-2. Back come the Devils. Elias drops it for Gianta. Forced wide. He misses everything. Up the boards. It's sealed off as Green moves up the left side. Puts it behind the net, and nice pass out front. Gibson had to make a save. And Getzlaf just able to clear the zone. Patrick Elias had the only goal last night in a 3-1 loss to the Carolina Hurricanes. One-time prolific scorer, now has 11 goals on the year. Fleischmann trying to get to the slot in the New Jersey zone after he was sent in by Getzlaf. And it's brought back the other way by Mateau, the former first-round draft pick. In his 2nd season, has spent almost the entirety in Albany in the American League. Up the boards it comes, and New Jersey native Kyle Palmieri is off to the races. Into the Devils zone, goes wide, fires as he used Jelena as a little bit of a screen, just missed. Dupre keeps it in, and he winds it around. Wisniewski steps up to keep it in, gets it back from Kessler. Bad angle shot by Wisniewski, comes all the way across the zone, and kept in by the point coverage of Simone Dupre. Now Palmieri from the slot, and that one was partially blocked, didn't have a lot on it as Schneider knocked it away. Fleischmann is dumped in the corner, and Kessler comes up with it momentarily, and then Mateau able to battle it to center red and gets it deep.
We haven't seen much of Mateau his rookie season here, but he's a big kid. You can see he's got really good size. He's listed at only 6'2", but he looks bigger, John, on the ice.
Born in Chicago, Illinois, he was the 29th overall pick back in the 2012 draft. Adam Henrique trying to bank it in off of Gibson. Now he'll chase as it comes back into the Anaheim zone. Francois Beauchemin is there. Ducks ice time leader on the season moves it along, and Ricard Raquel able to nudge it ahead. Bernier knocks it down, rolls right to the slot, and carefully covered by Maroon, who just is able to get it out. At center ice, Silverberg sends it the rest of the way.
Just watching Anaheim move the puck up the ice there, and you get a sense of another one of the things the Ducks are doing a better job of, and that is how they are dumping pucks in to the opponent's zone, keeping it away from the goaltender, giving themselves a chance to get some kind of a forecheck and some pressure established.
Well, that was just rugby behind the New Jersey net there a moment ago. Finally, Josephson gets it deep into the Anaheim zone, and the Ducks reverse it away from his forecheck. Tagliano up the far boards for a streaking Fowler into the New Jersey zone. Brings it near side, got it through. Schneider dropped it down. Thompson was right there.
Boy, since Fowler was left out of the lineup that one game, boy, he's been good in terms of joining the rush and helping to create.
He's been +4 in the 2 games since he came back into the lineup. He has 3 assists in those games as well. And he was in full flight there. Jordan Tutu moves it ahead, gets it back, and his wrist shot is blocked just inside the line, kept alive by Elias, who plays it across. As it comes to Gibson, he will freeze it and hang on. No score early on in New Jersey.
6'1", he's 206 pounds, and he loves to hit. And John Merrill just found out the hard way as he got deposited in that bench area in between the 2 team benches. Afterwards, he knew there was going to be a response. It was Tuomo Ruutu who actually took a little run at Wagner. But you can see Wagner's a pretty sturdy kid.
The The Devils are not one of the bigger hitting teams in the league. In fact, they're in the bottom third. They've out-hit the Ducks early on, 7-6, but don't tell that to John Merrill. Gianta trying to swat it out of the zone, fails, and now chases deep into his own end. Around for Andy Green. Former Miami of Ohio Red Hawk moves it out of the zone. Zubris gets it across. Gianta misses everything. That one rattles the glass. Lifted back, and Adam Larsson, the Swedish native, is there to get to it. This is the top D pairing for Lou Lamoriello's Devils, as Green and Larsson will log plenty of ice time. They'll play a little over 22 minutes a game. Getzlaf got a piece of that pass from Wisniewski, so the Ducks will change without an icing call. Eric Jelena starts back. Devils 0-3-1 in their last 4. And they are under 500 in their last 8 in this building. Nice transition as Fleischmann gets it over, and Palmieri's shot is deflected over the glass and out of play. Back in the Anaheim lineup today, Hampus Lindholm. And no surprise when you look at those plus-minus numbers. Brian, he has not played in 4 games this season. Yesterday's game against the Islanders, the first time Anaheim has won this season without Lindholm in the lineup.
Plus 51 in the last 2 seasons. Leads not only young defensemen, all NHL defensemen in that category. So in order to put that number up, you got to be a two-way defenseman. You got to contribute offensively, and you also need to know exactly what you're doing in the defensive zone. Just a very cerebral young player is Lindholm.
Is plus 22 this season, 4th amongst all NHL defensemen, as Mateau sends a long wrist shot to Gibson, who hangs on. Coming up tonight, it's Fox Sports Live. They'll have all the news from a busy day in the world of sports. A lot of college basketball news, NBA, and all the big NHL games as well. Fox Sports Live tonight on Fox Sports 1 and streaming live on Fox Sports Go.
Kind of an interesting day for Bruce Boudreau. The lineup has changed a couple of times because of the injury to Matt Bolesky. We wondered if Emerson Edom was going to draw back in, however, Thomas Fleischmann gets the assignment. Devils have been out of it for a while. They're not mathematically eliminated, but I think they've kind of known part of the reason, I think, why they've lost 4 games in a row.
Well, the coaching change that cost Peter DeBoer his job came on the 27th of December. The Ducks inadvertently put it right back in on their own goaltender as Fowler was trying to knock it away, but Gibson was there to make the save. And now they get a bounce as Maroon will bring it out of the zone. Adam Henrique takes a run at him, the leading scorer for the Devils this season. He was their leading goal scorer a year ago. Now has it go off the skate and right back to Peter Harrell. Anaheim trying to establish a forecheck here, as Maroon got a piece of that little pass, and Raquel swats it back into the New Jersey zone.
This line was very good yesterday against the Islanders. Maroon, Raquel, and Silverberg, all plus players in that game.
Raquel with 4 points in his last 4 games. Maroon has 6 points in his last 7. Cogliano had what eventually was the game winner yesterday. He's over the boards for Anaheim, joined by Thompson and Wagner. Wagner is well offside on this play. He didn't realize it at first, so now he'll change.
John, I think that's the other thing that Boudreau is pleased with. A little bit of depth scoring all of a sudden coming from the Ducks. Not just relying on the exploits of Getzlaf and Perry.
Long shot off a skate just wide. Thompson reaching for it. Can't come up with it. Cogliano does. And Perry redirects it in to the New Jersey zone. Gives Damon Severson a shove. Puck in their feet. And Josephson thought he had it for a moment, but it was stolen by the long reach of Perry. Getzlaf unable to get it back to the point. Jordan Tutu the other way. Tutu, who was bought out by the Detroit Red Wings after last season, has resurrected his career, playing over 60 games here this season with the Devils.
It's been that kind of a season for New Jersey. Tutu, Scott Gomez have been given second chances, or maybe third chances. John Gibson moments ago, a pretty good piece of work by him here as the Devils are sending people to the front of the net. Bernier gets a stick on that, and you can see that Gibson was able to make the stop with the left shoulder there. Good start to the hockey game for John Gibson. And New Jersey is a team that has been very good early in games this season. It certainly has not been the first period that has been an issue for them.
They actually scored on the power play in the first period and led 1-0 at Carolina yesterday and went on to lose that game 3-1. That's kind of been their MO this season. We are halfway through a scoreless first period in Newark.
Manager and interim head coach Lou Lamoriello has seen his team get off to good starts all season long. Look at it by period in terms of their goal scoring. Almost the same across the board, but the goals against a completely different story. There are +19 in first periods this year, a -25 in third periods. But boy, what a job they've done defensively in the opening periods of games this year. They're only allowing, less than half a goal a period is a remarkable defensive achievement. And they've shut down the Ducks very effectively here in the first 10 minutes of the opening period tonight.
Back in late December when the change was made and Peter DeBoer and Dave Barr were relieved of their duties, the word was Lou Lamoriello was going to come down and observe from the bench for a while. Well, I think it's safe to say he's going to do it for the rest of the season. Less than 10 games to go now, and he's still behind the bench.
Yeah, and he's got a couple of guys that he appears to be grooming. Scott Stevens, Adam Oates brought in at that same time.
And that's one of the many questions that surrounds this team moving into the offseason. What does Lou do with his head coaching situation? Of course, it's always been a fairly fluid situation here. Despite the organizational success, 3 Cup championships, Brian, 3 different coaches for all of those Cup championship teams. And one of those seasons, the Devils were first overall in the league with just a month to go, and they relieved Robbie Ftorek of his duties and replaced him with Larry Robinson. They went on to win the Cup. That was back in 2000.
Well, and that might have been the thing that really hurts any present-day coaches. The fact
agree.
that late move happened and they won a Cup that year. And Corey Perry can't get that shot through. The Devils defending well with their sticks, and I always thought that about New Jersey Devils teams, that their defense seemed to get more sticks on pucks. I used to attribute it to Larry Robinson's presence on the coaching staff, but it certainly seems to have been passed on. I mean, tonight, what have they tipped 3 or 4 pucks already? Up and over the glass on attempted shots by Anaheim.
I remember when Scott Niedermayer first came to the Ducks, that was one of the things that unless you saw him play night in, night out, you didn't appreciate about his game is how good he was with his hockey stick. Not only blocking shots, but just going into corners and coming out with possession. Obviously, Niedermayer spent the first 14 years of his career here as a Devil. Fowler flutters it into the New Jersey zone.
And now part of the Anaheim coaching staff and mentoring this crop of young defensemen. Vatanen, Fowler, Lindholm. We're definitely going to benefit from that tutelage.
Another offside here, this one against the Devils. Let's update our American Honda 3-star leaderboard. Ducks had some stars out at the Nassau Coliseum yesterday. Ryan Getzlaf still with a comfortably. How Freddie Anderson didn't move up after that performance yesterday against the Islanders. It's got to be all about home cooking when it comes to the 3 stars.
I don't know how he was not the first star of that game.
He had to be.
He was just sensational. Talked to him today a little bit about that performance, and he said, some games you just feel so right in the goal crease, and you don't think that anything could get behind you. I give a lot of credit to his team and how hard they battled in that second period against the Islanders, and he said, boy, was it nice to see that third goal go in at the opposite end, to see how opportunistic our team was.
Wisniewski has it pop off his stick a little bit, so he just rims it around in the New Jersey zone. Now left point, Simone Dupre. Dupre gets it down low for Silverberg. He keeps possession, but Jelena gave him a bump and didn't give him much of a passing angle. And the Devils able to work it around and out. Henrique off the glass, able to clear. Wisniewski stretches it ahead, just tipped into the Devils zone by Ricard Raquel. Lindholm trying to find Raquel quickly in the neutral zone. Missed him, however, and Tuomo Ruutu the other way. 2-2 can't get it through, and the Ducks clear it back. There ought to be a law. You can't put Ruutu and 2-2 on the same line. But Lou Lamoriello has done it here. 2-2 bounces it in, and Gibson just able to reach it.
I'm going out on a limb and saying it is the only Ruutu-2-2 combination, John, in NHL history.
NHL history, yeah. Well, that's the sort of nuggets you get on our show. You just don't get that when you open the newspaper. Under 7 to go in a scoreless opening period. A cautious period indeed. The Ducks have been held to just 4 shots on goal by the ever defensively minded Devils. I mean, this is a team that is out of the playoff picture. But, Brian, you look at them statistically speaking, they're top 10 in the league in goals against average. Schneider's having a great statistical season. They just can't score enough goals to make that work for them.
Well, there's a different set of rules that they operate by, too. Their forwards are... You rarely see them challenge a lot of people one-on-one. They dump pucks in. They put it into safe areas. And they've done it for a long, long time. They just don't have the breakthrough offensive talents that they used to have.
Broken stick behind the net belongs to Mateau. He'll go to the bench to get another. In the meantime, the Devils keep it in. Camilleri got it to the net. Zajac takes it from below the goal line and trickles it in front. That's smothered by the glove hand of Gibson, and he will hang on to that. In California, a couple guys up for the Cy Young.
Yeah, they're having good seasons. They've scored a lot more goals than they have helpers. They have that in common. 32 for Perry. He just keeps rolling along. Pretty good fencing match between two of the smaller yet offensively gifted players, Camilleri and Kyle Palmieri, exchanging short little cross checks. Lou Lamoriello was praising Mike Camilleri and the leadership he has shown in what has been a very tough season here for the Devils. They signed Camilleri last year to a 5-year, $25 million deal. And Lamoriello said he's turned out to be a bargain. James Wisniewski, by the way, a little bit irate that a penalty was not called as he was tripped up in the neutral zone.
Camilleri with a team-leading 25 goals this season, the 8th time in his career that he has reached the 20-goal plateau. Originally a second-round draft pick of the Los Angeles Kings. In the way-back days of 2001, Camilleri has also played twice for Calgary and Montreal, as well as the Kings, before becoming a Devil. And we're going to get delayed offside, or do they call this icing? I think they called it icing.
Here's the play with James Wisniewski in the middle of the ice, and it's Patrick Elias that gets his stick caught between the legs. Wisniewski was surprised. I think Elias was surprised. The Ducks are just trying to get a power play at some point.
Sure would be nice, wouldn't it?
Yeah, they did not get one the last game that they played.
There were no penalties called on the Islanders yesterday.
There's a lot. There seems to be a dearth of power plays in general around the NHL. And in fact, the New Jersey Devils, their last 4 games, they've had just one power play in 4 consecutive games. So it's just not an affliction that's bothering the Ducks.
Yeah, they're not going to get a lot of sympathy from tonight's opponent. The Devils have had 2 power plays or less in 6 straight games. And right on cue, we have yet to have a power play for either team in this one. 4.5 to go in a scoreless first. Kessler gets it back to the line, and it's rifled. A nice one-timer by Palmieri, but that's deflected out of play.
As Henrique, they got a skate foot, I think, on that shot. You were talking about this season that Schneider has had in the goal crease. I mean, he's been spectacular. He's delivered everything that they were hoping for when essentially they passed the torch from Martin Brodeur to Corey Schneider. That looks to be a real good pickup for the Devils and solidifies their goal crease for many years to come.
65th game of the year for Schneider, his 64th start. He's 3rd in games played and save percentage in the league. He's 6th in goals against average, 7th in shutouts. And he's great in this building. This year, his goals against average here at the Rock is 1.83. And in the last 2 seasons here in this building, he's got a 1.71. And he just flashed the glove and the left pad and made a point-blank save. Palmieri was down there, as was Kessler, banging away. Best save of the game for Corey Schneider.
Fleischmann also involved on this play. Fleischmann comes in late. His stick got tied up, and then Boschman rips it right into the midsection. But the Ducks attacking the goal crease, it was Palmieri who had the best chance. And Schneider was able to stuff Kyle Palmieri right on the doorstep. You know that this is a big game for Kyle. He probably watched a lot of games of the New Jersey Devils when he was a young man growing up.
First Anaheim shot on goal in over 8 minutes there. And a little flurry that results in a face-off to the left of Schneider.
John, during the pregame show, we had that feature on Kyle Palmieri. Only got kid in his high school that played hockey. Imagine that. And he gets all the way to the National Hockey League. Spent all that time skating out on the farm in New Jersey. His dad would build him a rink. And whenever they had ice, he said you just couldn't get him off it.
It makes it so hard when you're at that point in your life and there's no one that you have any camaraderie with it at that level. When you go to school every day, I mean, you really know that it's your passion when that's the case. He played prep hockey in nearby Jersey City, where the Ducks are actually staying. As we get an icing call here against New Jersey. Once played as part, did Kyle Palmieri, of the New Jersey Devils youth hockey system. There's a picture of him wearing the black and red of the Devils.
He looks the same, doesn't he? A little bit bigger, a little bit more facial hair now.
Well, was it last year when we were in here and he scored the game winner in overtime? What a day that had to be for Kyle Palmieri.
We saw a shot of the jerseys that they have hanging on the wall here at Prudential Center. That's 160 high school and club hockey teams represented on that wall.
Perry gets one to the net, kicked away by the right leg pad of Corey Schneider, former standout at Boston College. Now it's Getzlaf who muscles it back down low. Perry trying to angle it in from below the goal line. Ruutu gets to it, and he uses the glass to clear all the way back. Once again, this will be icing.
I think Corey Perry was trying to bank that puck in off of Schneider from behind the net. There aren't a lot of players that intentionally try and do that. Wayne Gretzky was the best ever in the NHL. He had a knack for catching a goaltender, just pulling away from the short side post. But look at the eyes of Corey Perry here. Yeah, he's trying to shoot it off the leg pad or the goal stick of Schneider. Can't make it happen that time.
Kessler doesn't like it, but he's chased from the circle. Face-off will now be taken by Palmieri, and he wins it. Back to the line for Wisniewski, and down is Kessler from a prone position. He tries to keep the puck alive. Pitchfork to the line by Tutu, not out. Wisniewski fires and scores! Boy, he did a great job to keep the puck in the zone. May have been tipped in front.
I think it's Kessler's goal. Ryan Kessler was in that high tip position, just above the hash marks and below the top of the circles. But you're right, a good athletic play by Wisniewski to knock that puck down, rip it. Kessler was way out. He just gets a little touch on that puck, and it's up into the top corner. No chance whatsoever. There's Kessler, a little touch just like that, and the signature celebration from Ryan Kessler.
So it's another 20-goal season for Ryan Kessler, and the Ducks have a 1-0 lead here in the latter stages of the opening period. Time of the goal, 17:09. Wisniewski will draw an assist, and now Cogliano picks it up in his own zone, got it to center red, and does get it into the Devils' zone. It squirts across, and thinking better of going in after it was Boschema, who stays back. Now roll right on goal. Schneider plays it away. Cogliano circles at center and whips it back in. Schneider is out to play it. Solo assist goes to Wisniewski. Now the Ducks changing, and Adam Larsson brings it to center. He gets the red line, and staying put is Gibson as it winds around on the base of the dasher. Dinas Zubris, the 18-year veteran, trying to dig it off the wall, did get it into the middle, but it's picked up by Maroon, who comes the other way into the New Jersey zone, leaves it on the wall for Silverberg, who gets it deep. John Merrill out of the University of Michigan, a native of Oklahoma City, moves it ahead, and now the Devils away to center. Severson brings it in a very late offside call. with just a minute 40 remaining in the period. A brand new 2015 Honda CR-V EXL will be given away to a lucky fan coming up on Fan Appreciation Night. That's just 10 days away, April the 8th. 4 contestants will hit the ice in the second intermission with a chance to win. Thanks to all of our contestants and participants who submitted videos throughout the year. And, of course, our thanks to our sponsor, American Honda. Henrique tries to go forward off the faceoff. He does, and then has his bid blocked as he got to the hash mark.
A little fancy, a little too fancy from Sammy Vatanen there, and he almost gets his pocket pick. It's one of the things that the Ducks have done a real nice job of the last couple of games, protecting the puck in the defensive zone.
Getzlaf got it to Sakac, who is bounced around in the corner. Yuri Sakac has it taken away by Scott Gomez. To center, Anaheim has to get onside as Perry had been knocked down. He gets back up, does get onside, and wires it across the zone. Sakac beaten to it behind the net by Andy Green. Getzlaf trying to change direction as he got it away from Gomez. Fowler curls into the high slot on his backhand, hands it off to Dupre. He just makes the wise choice of keeping it deep. Sakac tried to swat it back and then has to chase up the near boards, and Larson lost his stick in the process. Green skates it to center and gets it deep. Both teams will go for changes. Half a minute remaining in the opening period.
Ducks have been very physical with a couple of the Devils defensemen, Merrill and Larson in particular, in this opening 20 minutes.
Fleischmann trying to thread the needle. And he didn't connect with Kessler, but it's kept alive by Palmieri. Brings it to the high slot and whips it wide. 15 seconds in the period as Kessler keeps it in the zone. It's in the skates of Fleischmann down low. Fleischmann kept to the outside by Travis Zajac. Now activating off the point was Wisniewski. It's Palmieri to the high slot on the backhand. 1 second left as he tries to get the shot away, but he runs out of racetrack. A patient Anaheim team takes a 1-0 lead to the locker room after one.
Another solid period for the Ducks. John Gibson tested maybe a couple of times, but overall, once again, no turnovers, no significant turnovers in the defensive zone. And they get a goal, a nice athletic play by James Wisniewski, directed in by Ryan Kessler. So the strong play continues for Anaheim.
It is now the 6th 20-goal season of Ryan Kessler's NHL career, because he got the only goal of the opening period, a little tip of a James Wisniewski bid. And as a result, after one period of play at the Rock, the Ducks on top of the Devils, 1-0. Anaheim Ducks hockey is brought to you by Honda, official vehicle of the National Hockey League. Well, you look like you're on the streets of New York with nachos like that. But we're at the Rock in Newark, and the Ducks have a 1-0 lead over the New Jersey Devils after one period of play.
My arteries are hardening right now.
Breakfast of champions right there. That is, if you can get through it, I guess. The Ducks got through the opening period, and they're in a good place. When they lead after one period of play this season, a stellar 23-2-3 mark on the year. And as we get set for the second period of play, let's go down to the Anaheim bench. Our Kent French standing by with assistant coach Brad Lauer.
Brad, Johnny, thank you very much. Brad, at end of a long road trip right now. Did you like the way you guys came out in the opening 20 minutes?
I think the first 10 minutes, I thought we were sat back a little bit, just kind of waiting to see what was going to happen. And then I thought as the period went on, I thought we got our legs underneath us. We started to finish more body checks, and we ended up scoring a goal.
Brad, appreciate it.
Thanks.
All right, Johnny, let's send it back up to you.
Thank you, Kent.
John, I was going to say the catalyst for the hitting was Wagner. He started it.
Absolutely.
And as Boudreau has said to us so many times, it can be infectious. When someone lays out a big hit, everyone on the bench gets excited. Everyone else starts hitting as well, and the Ducks, as a result, are a better team. Wagner's making an impression here.
Well, you talk to people about the game of hockey, Brian, and oftentimes if you don't know, you say, well, those guys that play on the fourth line, they play 4 or 5 minutes a game. Back in the day, they used to sometimes change the momentum of a game with some fights. But now that there's not as much fighting anymore, exactly what you just laid out seems to be the role from a momentum standpoint for those fourth lines. If you're going to turn the momentum, you do it with a hit more often than you do by dropping the gloves. Getzlaf into the New Jersey zone, and he just loses the handle. Almost looked like he picked his head up at the moment of truth. Perry gets it back, though, to the net. Schneider reaching high to glove it down. Shoveled along and waiting for it at center. Francois Beauchemin, kind of a off-the-mark pass for Perry, and he took a pretty good hit from Dinas Zubras.
He sure did. Zubras is a big man. He's one of those guys that's very, very thick. And that one took a bite out of Corey Perry. Zubras is 6'5", 225. And then there is an art to hitting. Boy, what a pass.
Great outlet to Kessler in full flight, and Schneider spits a rebound out. Fleischman threw it back in front. Unable to find it was Palmieri. Now Fleischman works it away from Zajac down low. Travis Zajac able to move it up, and then now he'll track it down at center, and a strange bounce off the boards gets it over to Camilleri, and that one's blocked. Vatanen got in the way. Merrill back at the line, doesn't have a shooting angle either, and the give and go is denied on a good defensive play by Kessler. He leads it ahead to Vatanen, who's hit by Camilleri as he winds it around into the Devil's zone.
Camilleri has had a real physical game.
Not the biggest of stature, but Mike Camilleri has never been afraid to throw his weight around. Henrique holds one in to the corner where Wisniewski tries to just get it up the boards. Into the middle of the ice, kept in. Peter Harold looking for a tip. Henrique was driving by at the top of the blue paint, and now Vatanen upends his man in the corner. That's Bernier, the native of Quebec City, gets back up and plays on. And it comes up the wall to Maroon. Ducks 3-on-2 if they hurry. Wisniewski joins the rush. Silverberg takes the shot. Patted away by Schneider.
He was trying to bank that puck off the goaltender. 2-on-1 coming here.
It's Gomez, you know, he wants to pass. He got it to Henrique. Great save, Gibson. And another sprawling stop with the stick.
Unbelievable saves for Gibson a couple of times with the goal stick.
Off the near wing, Gomez chooses to shoot that time. And it went over top of the net. He's got it again behind the goal. Scott Gomez centers, and that's intercepted. Staying home in the slot was Maroon, the third all-time leading assist man in Devils history. Not hard to see why.
John, we didn't have an outnumbered attack the entire first period. We just got a sequence where both clubs challenged with the outnumbered.
2-2 rips one wide, fresh off the Jersey bench. Wagner trying to get it up on the near side and can't get it past Jacob Josephson. Behind the net, Dupre leaves it for Lindholm, who's overrun by Ruutu, just throws it across the zone. Larson got to it first. Dupre can't get the handle. 2-2 trying to center, and a good job by Gibson to smother it himself.
Well, he's been really good tonight, and he just made a spectacular save. But watch this athleticism right here as he's going to spin around. That's a dominant Hasek-like stop right there. Henrique's going to slam it home, and Gibson spins and still manages to keep the shaft of the goal stick down on the ice to deny Henrique, who I think was just absolutely shocked that he was even close to that one. A big stop from the young netminder.
Henrique was licking his chops over there. He had a 4x6, and he was reading the 36 on Gibson's back.
Never quit on a play. It's what they teach you when you're just a young kid learning how to play goal.
Larson's shot, that hit Gianta in front. He couldn't find it. And Perry able to work it up the boards and out. Zubras sends it back in, the native of Lithuania. He's played over 1,200 NHL games, 500 of them plus with the Devils.
Forecheck here for New Jersey has forced a couple of turnovers.
Zubras, who keeps doing it, he sets up Elias. Point blank save by Gibson. Sakic changes direction and finds some space. Perry goes rink wide out of the reach of Getzlaf, but he's able to poke it deep, and now he pressures Larson. Leaves it on the wall. Sakic trailing the play, gives it back to him. The captain from behind the net turns on the forehand, and that's sealed off on the near post by Schneider. Back to Getzlaf, set up by Perry, and that just missed.
That was a good pass. Good pass by Corey Perry, right in the wheelhouse.
He's got it again behind the goal. Throws it in front, intercepted by Larson with Sakic coming down the slot. Now it sneaks through at the point, and here comes the game's first penalty. Dupre reached back, and he tripped up Gianta.
That puck just bounced on Simon Dupre. He was trying to keep it in the offensive zone, and when it slipped by him, he reached, and Gianta had a step. That stick goes into the feet of Gianta, and the first penalty call of the game is made. Boy, that New Jersey forecheck was creating opportunities there. They forced a couple of turnovers. The Ducks defense would be wise, so you keep it in their mind that when in doubt, when under pressure, sometimes smart play is just to gun it around the boards, rim it hard.
The Devils were 1 for 2 on the power play against Anaheim in the season's only meeting between these two clubs. That was way back on January the 16th at Honda Center. A 5-1 Anaheim win, so New Jersey's only goal against the Ducks this season came on the power play.
In that game, Schneider started, took a puck off the collarbone, had to leave after the opening period. Kincaid came in and played decently the rest of the way, the backup netminder that does not see a lot of time here.
Anaheim had 40 shots on goal in that game, and while dominating the contest, they only gave up 16 shots at the other end. It was still only 2-0 early in the third period, so the Devils are a team that can hang around on you. Camilleri is their leading goal scorer on the power play. He's got 8 this year. This is their leading assist man, and it's Bernier who was set up by Gomez this time. Nice point-blank save by Gibson. Possible 2-on-1 shorthanded. Thompson has Cogliano with him. He'll take the shot. Glove save Schneider, and he's forced to hold on.
Real good stop by Schneider. Clear cut 2-on-1. Andrew Cogliano got an angle in the neutral zone. Watch what Cogliano. Can you see him at the top of your screen? You can't see him on that angle. But he was patient at the blue line so as not to go offside. Stick was down. He was hoping for the cross-ice pass. Nate Thompson elects to take the shot. Excuse me. There was John Gibson on Bernier, who was right on the doorstep.
Still over a minute remaining in the penalty to Dupre, and the Ducks shorthanded. Think better of trying to establish an attack in the zone as Fowler hinges it back. Now Wisniewski picks his spot, and that's around the dasher all the way down. Jordan Tutu brushes it back for Patrick Elias. Elias with 11 goals on the season. 4 of them have come on the power play. Josephson brings it in on right wing. Drops it back. Severson gives it to him once more right to the side of the net, and Elias had it tipped away by Fowler. Loose puck comes to Silverberg. Tries to skate it out of the zone, but he's caught from behind by Josephson, and now it's angled out by Fowler. And Schneider all the way to the dot to come out and play it, realizing both teams were changing.
You know, the penalty killing was sensational yesterday against the Islanders. It has been very good here in the early going of this game as well. Not a lot of great chances for the Devils on the power play.
Tutu spins with a puck off the goal line to Josephson, now under 10 seconds in the power play. Little two-man game between those two. Boschman gives a bump to Josephson. Loose puck dug out by Elias. Tutu finds Zajac alone in front. He can't settle it. And just as the penalty expires to Dupre, he tried to make a pass. Back to the line. Severson serves it around. Time and space again, and Gibson steps out. Elias threw it back into the crease, and it went off a skate.
A couple of late chances. They get the Ducks defense trapped on the ice and tired and having a tough time moving people out from in front of that goal crease. And they come close a couple of times to exploiting that.
Gibson out to play it, but Giunta gets it right back to the goal crease. Oh, Fowler knocked it away from his netminder. Wrist shot by Green, tipped on the way by Giunta, and frozen by Gibson. Only one Devil shot on the power play, but in the seconds after that, they were very dangerous.
And continues to rely on the goaltending of John Gibson. The Devils have had 8 good chances here in the second period. We're not at the halfway mark. Some athletic stops by the young netminder and some interesting battles in front. That was Simone Dupre tying up Jordan Tutu right on the doorstep. And then this little redirect here by Giunta also fended off by the athleticism of John Gibson.
Faceoff will be to his right, a Pittsburgh native. Watches Kessler win the draw. Boy, has Ryan Kessler been great in the face-off circle of late. He kicks this one over to Palmieri. Trails the play and can't get the shot through. Schneider will cover up. Last 2 games combined, Ryan Kessler has won 72% of his face-offs, and he regularly takes the most draws each night for Anaheim. This is not a guy that's going 3 for 4. This is a guy who is doing yeoman's work and already won 5 of 7 so far tonight.
And he's a guy that will play against the opposition's best and most talented offensive forward. So here he is against Zajac. Zajac able to pull that one back.
Broadcaster's curse never fails. Wisniewski steps up on the left boards to keep a puck alive. It bounces back, and patient is Palmieri's pass comes through to Dupre, who rockets it wide. Loose to the left side of the goal, and the Devils able to clear. Wisniewski took a chance as he stepped up but couldn't keep it in the zone. He got a piece of it to keep the Devils from flying the other way. Now they do come up with it, and it's Travis Zajac cutting to the middle. Great pass across. Better sprawling save going right to left from Gibson.
Boy,
that was Camilleri that he stopped. Palmieri's bid goes off a skate, but he gets it back to the net off the end boards. And Green plays it away. Things have opened up a little bit, Brian.
yeah, they have. This is a much more entertaining period of hockey than the opening 20, that's for sure. And John Gibson, he has been sensational here again tonight. Boy, for a while there, the Ducks goaltenders were struggling just a little bit in games at the start of this road trip. A different story in the last 3, that's for sure.
Gianta tried to fly the zone, but no angle for him, so Elias carries it to the line, and his shot deflected wide. Lindholm bumped in the corner. Elias gets it to Zubras. He's spun around by the stick of Getzlaf. Can't draw a call. Getzlaf lost his stick in the process. In comes Boschma. He's hit by the much smaller Gianta. Steven Gianta drags it along the end boards. Now Elias has it slashed away from him. Nice play by Lindholm, who digs it out of his feet and moves it quickly. Getzlaf got the boards to center. Sakic as it deflected off his stick and into the Devils bench.
We saw in yesterday's game some samples of Frederik Andersen's ability to move laterally and make stops. Well, here's John Gibson with the same thing. Now, that puck is passed a long distance to get to Camilleri, but Gibson has to come a long way to fend that off. He gets a powerful push off the right skate and shuts down the short side.
Just about halfway through the hockey game here in New Jersey, 1-0 Anaheim as it's shot in from outside center ice by Eric Zelina. He has to chase back along with Peter Harold. Harold, a one-time Los Angeles King, gives it back, and Zelina's pass deflected through center. Gibson is out to play it. Sammy Vatanen keeps it on the boards as the Devils with forechecking pressure. Raquel kicks it to center, and Gomez, covering the point now, retreats back into his own ice. Harold headmans up the right side, unable to find it in his feet for a split second was Bernier, and when he finally did, the Devils are offside. Fan Appreciation Night coming up on April the 8th at Honda Center, where the Ducks will host Dallas. Get a free team photo presented by Fox Sports Prime Ticket when you attend, as well as a chance to win some of the many other prizes given away throughout the course of the evening. Go to AnaheimDucks.com/tickets for more information. Pat Maroon going right to the Anaheim locker room. Joe Huff, the athletic trainer, following him. We'll watch that situation. I didn't see, did you, Brian, anything?
I did not see anything on the ice, but you know, these types of nagging injuries tend to pop up towards the end of road trips.
Well, the linesman waved the icing, said play on, and then after the guys started bumping each other, they blew the whistle and said, you know what, it should have been an icing, or no, they're actually going to bring it back to center ice. I don't know why they stopped play there.
It's an admission of a mistake being made whenever they face that puck off at center.
Well,
Maroon back on the bench. Yeah, good to see that.
Schneider will play it at the side of the net, and Harold under duress as he brings it to the near side. Both teams seem to have amped up the forecheck. They're just having a little more success. Great job by Dupre at the line to keep a puck in on a couple different occasions there. Wagner rims it around. It rides up the glass and goes out of play. We're just past the halfway mark of the hockey game in New Jersey.
Ken French behind the Ducks bench with Corey Perry in the second half of this period. What do you guys need to do to put some more pressure on Corey Schneider?
Well, I agree. He's got to get the puck in deep, get under D, start that cycle game, get some shots. I mean, I think the more shots we get, the better off we're going to be. The second opportunities are going to be there.
We appreciate it.
All right, thanks.
Johnny, I'll send it back up to you.
Thank you, Kent. The next point that Corey Perry gets will be the 600th of his NHL career. He's also closing in on 300 goals. Interesting to see if he can get there. He needs 5 in the final 5 games of the season. Brian, I wouldn't put anything past Corey Perry when it comes to goal scoring.
No, remember the streak that he went on to get to 50 goals?
Wow. Who could forget?
When he had 19 goals in the last 17 games, something like that, to capture the Rocket Richard Trophy is the guy who got 50 that year.
The only guy in the league that year, back in 2011. What a season it was. MVP of the entire league bestowed upon Perry.
There's 19 goals in the last 16 games to win the Hart and the Rocket Richard trophies. That was 4 seasons ago.
So you were way off. You're slipping, man. You said 19 and 17.
It's the end of the long trip, John.
It's 4 years ago, Brian. I don't even know what I had for breakfast. So I actually think it's quite impressive. Here's John Merrill forced back for the Devils, and Camilleri will give him some support. Jersey into the Anaheim zone, but the pass missing the stick of Mateau, but he gets it back. Gibson was there waiting at the near post. Kessler rims it around. Merrill at the point, able to hold the zone, and around it goes. Fleischmann meeting at the puck along with Larson there on the far boards. The Devils keep it deep. A good job by Lindholm, who got inside. Was able to move the puck around the boards again, held in, and Andy Green's shot doesn't get through. Good shift for the Devils here. Camilleri puts it in front, tipped away by the goal stick of John Gibson. Palmieri has had a number of shots on goal in this game already. Gets center red and feathers it in.
And Palmieri playing with an edge in this game tonight, too. There's been a lot of stick work involving Kyle tonight, both on the receiving and the distribution side of things.
Always have a little more pep in your step when the family's in the crowd, as they were yesterday when he scored a goal in the Ducks' 3-2 victory over the Islanders. He always seems to come to life offensively against these hometown teams, the Rangers, the Devils, the Islanders. Puck brushed out by Gianta, but run down by Fowler. He and Vatanen paired together tonight, and they play catch deep in the zone. Fowler with a crisp pass across as he's hit by Gianta. Nice hard pass by Getzlaf ahead to Sakic. Yuri Sakic sends it over for Perry. And the Devils able to reverse it around, and it'll come all the way back.
Anaheim's defensemen have not been able to keep in as many pucks in the offensive zone. They were able to do that in the opening period.
Getzlaf hands it off, and Wisniewski's dump around the boards handcuffed Schneider a little bit. He wasn't able to play it. Merrill moves it ahead, and room up the right side for Gomez. Playing in his 600th game as a Devil tonight. He gives it over to Henrique, and he rattles the high glass. Merrill kept it in off the shoulder of Wisniewski. He goes up the middle, and it was behind Silverberg. Merrill bumped hard by Silverberg as the Devils regroup in their own zone. 1-0 Anaheim. A 2015 shot advantage so far for the Devils to this point. I was talking to Yuri Sakic earlier today, Brian, and he's only played 3 games now on the top line with Corey Perry and Ryan Getzlaf, and I said, how do you like it? And he said, well, it's different. I played all year in Montreal and here in Anaheim on 3rd and 4th lines. He said, you play different. You get to center ice, you dump it in. He said, half the time I'm expecting us to dump it in, and Getzlaf makes a pass that I don't think he can even make. And then I'm not ready to receive it.
It is very much a mindset. Yuri Sakic is, I think, a nice fit for those two because he's got the speed. He adds an element of speed to the line. Against certain teams, especially I think teams that have an ultra-quick defensive tandem that they like to match up against Getzlaf and Perry, I think it helps to have a little bit of speed so you can get on. You can have one member of the line that can get on them in a hurry.
He mentioned he enjoyed the ice time as well. He played a season-high 16-plus minutes yesterday on the island as a member of that top line. Hard sometimes for certain players to get used to their style once they gain the offensive zone as well. Obviously a grinding, cycling line. I think Sakic has the size to play with those guys. Had 3 shots on goal in the win against the Islanders yesterday. Maroon comes up with the puck and now careful to protect it as he skates it out of the Devils zone. His pass off the stick of Thompson.
One thing to keep in mind with Sakic, just 22 years of age.
Yeah.
So you know, he's got a good future ahead of him. He's got good instincts. And, you know, there's a lot of players that break into the NHL that don't come anywhere near their offensive potential at age 22. It takes until they get into their mid to late 20s before they really start to understand how to position themselves, how to create space for themselves, and how ultimately to become a better goal scorer.
15 games for Sakic with the Ducks. 5 points and a +3. Comfort level seemingly coming with each and every game. Larson's wrist shot looking for a tip, ends up all the way in the near corner, and it's slashed out by Silverberg. Will not go far enough for icing as Larson hinges over to get it. Ahead to Camilleri, 1-0 Ducks, 5:40 to go, second period. Good stick in the neutral zone to break up the cross-ice pass by Fowler, and Schneider forced out to play. Fowler again holds the zone, drifts it to the net. Easy glove save for Corey Schneider. As it was after one, it still is with 5:26 to go in the second in Jersey.
There's not been a lot of room on the sheet of ice here at the Rock, but there have been a lot of big body checks thrown. 21 hits by the Devils, 14 by the Ducks, but there's been a lot of those instances where players have been made to pay a price in order to hold on to possession of the puck. So you better keep your head up, because there are a number of people on both of these rosters that, boy, if given the opportunity, they're not going to take it easy on you. They will finish those hits.
Kessler with the face-off win. Brushed on the backhand by Fowler, intended for Palmieri, who can't get the handle, but he blocks a clear twice and now chases it across the zone. Just a pure effort play there from Kyle Palmieri. Fleischmann now down low. Got to a loose puck before Travis Zajac. Puts it to the line. Covering the point, Palmieri, who checks his stick as he misfires on the slap shot. Merrill plays it back, and now room in the neutral zone for the Devils, Stefan Matteau. He's ridden off the puck on the boards. Vatanen does a good job now on the back of the net. Palmieri converged upon by two defenders. Back comes Vatanen, storming the other way, and his pass goes through Kessler, and as he takes it back off the boards, it's offside. Fox Sports Supports is proud to team up with the Boys and Girls Clubs of America. They help young people reach their full potential as productive, caring, responsible citizens through programs that promote character and leadership, as well as education, healthy lifestyles, and more. For more information, visit foxsportssupports.com.
Great cause. Boys and Girls Clubs do so many good things in our communities.
Ducks back in their own zone. It's Simone Dupre on the backhand, and Perry does the same as he whips it across. Sakic has room. Yuri rims it around and in off the stick of Getzlaf. It pops out to the line, and Elias leads it ahead. Dinas Zubris flips it back in. Zubris missed 8 games with a leg laceration earlier this season. Had played in over 120 straight before that. Getzlaf, parallel with the blue line, now chips it ahead off the stick of Wisniewski. And Getzlaf covers the point. Comes back out center ice. And Perry gets it in.
A territorial battle right now.
Scoreless so far here in the second, but certainly far more opportunities for both teams. And a little more up and down than what we had in the opening period, but it was the first period that produced the game's only goal.
And the Ducks with the lead are going to take things safe and secure. So you're not seeing a lot of Anaheim defensemen at this point in the game joining the rush or jumping up into the attack. They're doing what coaches call playing by the score. They've got the lead. And they know that New Jersey's history. They know that they have really struggled in third periods. I don't think Bruce Boudreau would be upset one bit if he got back in the locker room with a 1-0 lead.
3:25 to go in the middle period. Devils start back out. Peter Harold gets center red and puts it on the boards around and in. Gibson stays put as Henrique forces it deeper in the zone and then gets it back. Tries to center looking for Gomez, and that was deflected away. Good job by Lindholm, who got in the way. Silverberg up the left wing and deep into the Devils zone now. Raquel trails the play and picks it off the boards, throws it towards the net. Goes across off the corner boards and a little short behind the back pass by Maroon, just missing Silverberg. Scott Gomez. Number 4 all-time leading scorer in Devils history, just a few points behind Scott Niedermayer.
Well, what a season it has been for Gomez. Came here at the beginning of the year and no one expected him to really stick. There was a rededication to an off-ice training program with Vladimir Bure.
He's become one of their leading scorers. Not that they are one of the more prolific teams in the league, but I don't think a lot of people outside of the Gomez camp thought that that would be the result of the late signing. They didn't sign him until early December. Now here's a puck loose in the slot. Josephson denied by Gibson.
A good stop again by John Gibson. And kind of a broken play where that puck hit a Duck player and bounced right to Josephson. Here's the shot. Actually, it hit Josephson in the chest, excuse me. Came right back to him. He didn't do much with it. It went right into the chest of John Gibson. Gibson does a good job, however, on that shot. Kind of trapping it against his chest, so there's no rebound.
Swedish native Josephson was the first-round pick of the Devils back in 2009. Mateau nudges it below the goal line. Wisniewski given a rough ride, able to get it up the boards, though, and Palmieri feeds it back across as Dupre joins the rush. Slow rolling puck that Schneider is out to play. Under 2 to play in the second. Mateau takes the hit, waits for the support, and here come the Devils the other way. Camilleri's shot fought off, then he got the rebound, and that hit the the far side post.
The first big break for Gibson. Camilleri, boy, he's got those quick hands, doesn't he?
Loose puck came through, and Gibson with a great save. I don't know how he saw it. The rebound picked up by Wisniewski, and he's able to clear the zone. Palmieri touches it at center for Kessler. Drop pass back to Palmieri. Ole tried to go across. Good-looking pass, but it was broken up as Kessler went to the far circle. Zubris in a hurry the other way. In behind the goal. Sanders has a man there. Elias had it deflected away. Palmieri went down in front of it, and I think it went off of the Duck forward. Saccoccia muscles it as far as he can. Hit as he sends it into the Devil's zone. And then Gianta missed Zubris in the middle of the ice. Lindholm has Zubris all over him, and he throws it across.
Yeah, the Devils making their push here, and they've had the puck. The Ducks haven't been able to do much.
Here's Elias, and he overskates it. Ducks able to get it back to center off the boards. Perry gets it from Saccoccia. Tries to draw it into the middle, knocked off his stick. Ducks had too many men on the ice. They got away with it. That puck squirted out to center ice. Wisniewski hadn't finished a change yet, and when Lindholm played it, you could hear the Devils bench screaming.
Yeah, the referees don't want to make calls, John. I mean, it's as simple as that. They're letting a lot go in this game. We've only had one power play.
Icing call here against the Devils with just over 6 seconds remaining.
Another pretty good scoring chance. Good stop by Gibson. The first one on Camilleri. Here's the rebound that had John Gibson beaten to the short side. And you see the traffic, and boy, great job there by Gibson. See him get down low and kind of spot that puck through traffic. So it has been pretty much all New Jersey in the middle period, and yet John Gibson has been very, very good. And the primary reason why the Ducks still have the 1-0 lead.
Key face-off to the right of Schneider. Kessler to oppose Gomez, and Gomez ties him up long enough for Larson to skate with it out of the corner and bring it to center ice. That's going to do it for the second period. And a lot going on in the period, but nothing on the score sheet. The Ducks lead 1-0 now after 2.
Good goaltending can certainly make you feel better about yourself, because Gibson, on the heels of Frederik Andersen's sensational performance yesterday against the Islanders, having a whale of a game tonight. The Ducks have got to do a better job of hanging on to the puck and not just chipping it back, giving it back to their opponent. They spent a little bit too much time in that middle period defending.
Well, who has the stamina? We'll find out in the third. Both the Devils and Ducks playing the second of back-to-back games in as many nights. And the Ducks will take a 1-goal lead into the third period. 40 minutes of play in the books, and only Ryan Kessler's goal to this point as the Ducks lead in New Jersey by a count of 1-0. Anaheim with a chance to finish the road trip with 3 straight wins and make it an over 500 trip. Just one more road game after tonight, and that'll be the season finale 13 days from now in Phoenix against the Arizona Coyotes.
It is not that far away where the Ducks will find out who their first-round playoff opponent will be. And the start of the Stanley Cup playoffs, boy, what a great time of year that is to be a hockey fan.
Ducks will have home ice advantage as Getzlaf storms into the Devils zone and flips it over for Corey Perry.
A little change. You see Pat Maroon now on the left wing. Maroon stepping in for Yuri Sekac as Bruce Boudreau not happy with the second period, so as he has been known to do, tinkers with his lines here at the start of the third. A different kind of line, of course. When Maroon is on the left wing, it's more of a cycling the puck down low type of line.
I like to call it a smash and grab line.
Yeah, they are that. And boy, Pat Maroon's had some nice moments on this road trip.
He's got a little mini scoring streak going. He's got a goal and an assist with points in each of the last 2 games, but the plus-minus has been very good as well, as you see there. Hasn't mattered what line he's been on, whether he's been playing with the big boys or whether he's been playing with Rickard Rakell. And going his way. Now Getzlaf protects the puck and a head off the stick of Maroon. It'll trickle into Schneider.
Short shift for the Ducks. And just over 40 seconds to start the period. And I guarantee you that was also talked about inside the locker room. End of a trip.
Puck comes to the front of the net. Camilleri couldn't get the handle. And it's Fleischmann who strides the other way up left wing and into the Devils zone. Trying to cut to the front of the net, but he's bumped off the puck. Gets it back, and Severson decks him again as he rims it around for Boschman. Fleischmann behind the net. Has it knocked away by Merrill. Continues to battle on, joined by Kessler. He cycles it back to the corner for Kessler. He put it between his legs to Palmieri. Now to Fleischmann, one-timer just misses, and Lindholm gets to the far point in time. Fleischmann, nice little spin move, had Palmieri for a moment. Now to the line, Boschman with a drive, it deflects into the net! Traffic in front, Schneider was tracking it, but he lost track, and the Ducks have a 2-0 lead. Palmieri and Kessler were both there. I think they're trying to sort it out themselves right now.
I don't know if Kessler got a touch on it, but he was shoving the defenseman Merrill towards the front of the net. And I think it goes off Merrill and up and over the goaltender. Here's the shot. Yeah, it's off the defenseman. Kessler ducks. Merrill does not. And he looked to be in a little bit of discomfort when he went back to the bench. That hits him up high.
Yeah, he doesn't look good.
And no chance whatsoever for the goaltender. We'll see it right here. Yeah, it's just almost like in the neck, the right side of the neck. Pops over the shoulder of Corey Schneider. They're going to review this. They're looking to see if perhaps Ryan Kessler got a touch on that puck with a high stick. Did not look like it did from that angle. Francois Boschman saying, I'm pretty sure that went in off my stick.
And for Boschman, who's got 6 goals and plus 14 in his last 22, he has really picked up the offense. You can see there's the duck by Kessler, and it looks like off the right shoulder, perhaps, of Merrill.
Yeah, well, you saw the reaction of Merrill when he went back to the bench. He was kind of hurt on the play. Kessler's stick was up, however, as he was just kind of ducking and trying to get out of the way. He didn't want to get hit in the face. And difficult to tell from that overhead angle. I think that's the best angle, but judging by the reaction of the defenseman Merrill, that took a bite out of him, and it's just going to be Francois Boschman's goal.
If so, it would be his 10th of the season, the first time in his 11-year NHL career that he's reached double digits in goals. Merrill appears to have shaken it off. He's not offering any information to the officials right now. I think he probably has a sneaking suspicion.
Well, watch again from this angle and watch Merrill afterwards. It hits him, and then as he skates away, you can see that He's kind of shrugging that right shoulder up against his neck. That's where the puck hit him. He's still kind of shrugging the right shoulder, holding his neck now. That's because that's what the puck bounced off of into the net.
Well, you saw the indication. Mike Lego was the down-low referee, if you will. And he was emphatic with the goal call. So the call on the ice is goal. And after discussing it with the situation
Video review is inconclusive. The call on the ice stands that it hit the New Jersey defenseman's shoulder and into the net. We have a good goal.
And a good explanation for Mike Lego. Kudos to him. So it's the 10th of the year, and more importantly, it has doubled the Anaheim lead. The Ducks early in the third, now on top 2-0.
You know, John, production from the blue line this season for Anaheim has been sensational. I think right now there's only the Nashville Predators who've got more goals from their defense than the Anaheim Ducks do from their blue line. And that's a huge step forward for this Anaheim team.
We talked about the Calgary Flames as a potential playoff team against the Ducks in the postseason. Another team in the West that has gotten a lot from their defense.
10 fewer goals than Anaheim's defense for Calgary this season. I was really surprised when I looked at that the other day. And of course, they've been without the services of Mark Giordano. And he was a big part of that offense.
Wisniewski being tied up by Henrique, and a penalty coming up to the Devils here. Wisniewski kept his legs moving, and Adam Henrique had enough of him to draw a holding minor.
Minor penalty, holding.
And there's the indication, and watch one hand on the stick. He kind of spins James Wisniewski around. Wisniewski sells it too. He feels the pressure of the glove on the midsection there and contributes to the Ducks getting a call. We finally get a power play opportunity.
The first they've had since Thursday in Boston. And they had two, one in the third period and one in overtime. So the Ducks up 2-0, have the extra man. They were 1 for 3 against the Devils back in early January when these teams met at Honda Center. Botnick up the right side, uses the end boards behind Schneider, and he finds Perry. Nice entry to the zone, and then they get it back to the point. Botnick tees it up. That's deflected over top. Getzlaf. A little backhand pass will split everybody and go all the way back. Botman is there to get a big opportunity here for the Ducks to open things up. That would really force the Devils out of their comfort zone. Fowler trails the play just wide. May have been tipped by Maroon. Behind the net, Perry lays it back. Getzlaf quickly to Perry in the left circle. Across to Votman, who rips it, and out steps Schneider, who fell awkwardly. I think he was looking for goaltender interference on Maroon.
I think you're right. You know, I was talking with General Manager Bob Murray about the GM's meetings, and they said there was an awful lot of discussion about what to do about contact in and around the goal crease. They said there were some pretty lively debates on that topic.
Palmieri across the line, tries to drop it back. Good job by Wisniewski as Zubris tried to chip it by him. Now Kessler chases. Palmieri keeps it in and pitches it below the goal line. Just over 20 seconds in the power play as the Ducks retrieve the puck, and it's Palmieri stepping off the boards. Now he lays it back. Dupre gets it over, and a one-timer by Wisniewski, handled by Schneider. The rebound taken to the corner by Kessler. James Wisniewski with a wrist shot, looking for the tip. Palmieri was there, gets tripped up after Schneider made the stop, and the penalty will expire. Henrique out of the box as the play is whistled down for being off a high stick.
Well, a smart play by James Wisniewski. Not the big wind-up. This was the play where there was contact made with Schneider and Pat Maroon. And then I was talking about the debate at the general manager's meetings, and there was a huge variance in what people think should be called goalie interference. Like, for example, if the goaltender is above the blue paint and there is that incidental contact, yes, maybe the goaltender can't make a play on the puck, but should he be allowed to come out that far? because when you come out in front of the blue paint, you are encouraging that there will be more contact between yourself and any attacking forward. And the forwards are looking at the puck. Half the time they're not looking at the goalie, so it's a tough one, and they can't reach a consensus on what they want to do about it.
Well, for my money, and I know I've never been in the union, but just as an observer, if the goaltender comes out of the blue paint and he's treated the same as he is in the blue paint, he essentially is extending the crease by just leaving it.
Exactly right. There's even been some discussion about making the crease bigger, which I don't think they can do. And then having absolutely no contact within that blue paint. As the rule stands right now, a lot of people still don't know this. You're allowed to go into the crease. You can stand in the crease. And if the goaltender is not impeded as he tries to make a save on a puck, it's still a good goal.
Well, Brett Hull has always said that was the case. 2-0, the Ducks have the lead. They've changed the goal. They originally gave it to Francois Beauchemin from Lindholm and Kessler at 1:39. Now they've given it to Kessler from Beauchemin and Palmieri. So all we know is the Ducks lead 2-0, and that's really all we need to know.
Much better period here from Anaheim. The first 5 minutes, they're starting to skate again, and they're a lot more determined as they handle the puck, not to give it away quite so easily.
Well, if it stands as Kessler's goal, it'll be his second of the night and 21st of the season. An errant pass through center. They waved the icing because Fowler fanned on it. Gibson out to play it. Vatanen moves it ahead, and Maroon got it to Getzlaf. His cross-ice pass deflected away, though, by the stick of Adam Larson. Getzlaf coming back. Comes up with it and finds an opening, angling it off the boards back to the Devils zone. John Merrill handles there. 13:40 to go in the game. The Ducks lead 2-0. They got one in the first, and the goal here early in the third to build a 2-0 lead. Off the glass all the way back. Merrill is there to get it. His pass broken up on a nice play by Fleischmann. Getzlaf trying to get the transition going, and Palmieri wipes it in.
Boy, away from the puck. Kyle Palmieri is really skating tonight. Leads all Anaheim players with shots on goal.
And Palmieri comes up with a giveaway, and the Devils zone feeds Fleischmann. Shots are 4-0 in this period in favor of the Ducks. And now they work deep in the Devils zone. Kessler spins off the wall, and it comes up the boards to Mateau. Mateau the other way takes a long wrist shot. Palmieri tried to hit him in the neutral zone and went awkwardly into the boards. He's a little shaken up, but the Ducks have doubled their lead. Now has a 2-goal night, and Kyle Palmieri has been all over the ice in his return to his home state.
Yeah, Palmieri's had a very strong game. Ryan Kessler now asked to win some faceoffs. He's done a great job in that regard in recent games for the Ducks, as you mentioned, John.
Henrique circles the goal, trying to get it to the net. It's blocked. Bernier hacks it right on. A save made by Gibson. Held in by Schellon off the line. Just missed. Dupre carefully puts it to the perimeter. But now the Devils storming the castle. Bernier tries to center. Blocked by Dupre. Nice play there from his knees as he hooks the puck back off the end boards, and it comes over to Cogliano. Ducks will be able to get a bit of a change as he feathers it into the Devils zone, and they nearly cough it up in front of their own net. Dupre again steps up in the neutral zone. Bernier chips it by for Mateau. Forced wide. Wisniewski takes him behind the goal. Stefan Mateau keeps it in the zone, and now it comes across to Zajac. Travis Zajac moves it along, gets it back from Mateau. To the line, Merrill walks it to the middle, doesn't have anything, so he'll just backhand it to the near corner. Ducks in a little bit of preservation mode in their own zone, careful keeping the puck to the outside, but they don't get it out. And now Thompson does. Devils right back onside and right back into the zone.
Neto, I'll tell you what, he gets those hands up high.
Little poke by Gibson, and it comes across his crease. Zajac tipped it just wide. Smart play by Maroon to just angle it out of harm's way and alleviate pressure. Damon Severson gets it ahead. Camilleri only as far as the Anaheim strike. Quickly moved back by Perry. The Ducks get it deep at the other end.
John, we've been raving about Cam Fowler and how good he has been in terms of joining the attack, but he makes a real nice defensive play moments ago, and it's Camilleri who has kind of been in the middle of everything from an offensive standpoint for New Jersey. It spins around. He's looking for Zajac, who's wide open on the back door, and Fowler gets a little touch on that cross-ice pass and then ties up the stick of Zajac, so a smart play by him.
Clock winds to 10:45 to play in the game. 2-0 Ducks as Maroon holds the defensive bay, protecting the puck out of the corner. Steven Gianta hacks it to center, but Perry plays it back, and now Fowler trying to rev it up. Gets center red and gets it in. Schneider out to play it again. Gives it up in the corner to Perry. Maroon trades places with him. Converged down by a couple defenders. Gets it to Perry behind the goal. Nice look as he gets it out to Getzlaf. Ducks are changing defensively, so Getzlaf just curls it back to the corner. Lindholm had it go out of his reach, and now back come the Devils. Possible 2-on-1. Great recovery by Lindholm.
Boy, was it ever. He was just absolutely flying.
Perry brings it to center, and the wise play gets center red and trickle it in. The clock now under 10 minutes to go in the game. Long way to go, but it's the Ducks who have the lead on top 2-0. Ryan Kessler with both goals. Pass goes through Josephson. He and Fleischmann chasing the Anaheim zone. Palmieri looks over his shoulder and tries to kick it up the wall as he got hit by Ruutu. Good communication there as Boschman now gets it ahead off the reversal. Schneider fights it off as Kessler had a chance for the half. Palmieri comes away with it, and from behind the net, his shot deflected over top.
A big stop by Schneider, and what a pass by Boschman to spot Kessler streaking up through the middle of the ice.
Now Jelena brushes it ahead. 2-2 sweeps it into the Anaheim zone. And he gets the pressure on Dupre, who did a good job to spin off of it and possess the puck. Ducks 3-on-2 if they hurry. Palmieri changed on the play. Wisniewski drops it to Cogliano, pulls it in. Glove save by Schneider. Left-handed larceny from the New Jersey netminder as the Ducks were looking to add to their lead in New Jersey.
Kessler to make the stick available. Well played by Schneider. Takes away that short side top corner. Kessler does a good job getting that puck up, skate the stick. And Schneider shuts him down. Schneider's given up a couple of goals, but I tell you what, he's been very good in this game as well. Quick snap on the left hand there to deny Andrew Cogliano.
Schneider has established career highs this season in games played and wins with 26. Former Jennings Trophy winner with Vancouver back in 2011. He shared it with Roberto Luongo. So they feel like they've got a goaltender for the future here in New Jersey, and now they just need some more pieces. Off the corner boards, Fowler settles a rolling puck and pitchforks it on the high glass, up and out. Well, this is the last time I'm going to mention it. They've changed the goal in the building again, giving it back to Francois Boschman now from Palmieri and Fleischmann. That goal came early in this third period, and the Ducks now, by virtue of that, have a 2-0 lead.
You say that now.
I'm done. I won't mention it
They
again.
change it again.
Nope.
We'll hear from you.
Nope, not going to talk about it. But I will tell you, it's not too late to get your team together and register for the first annual Casey's Cup Charity Tournament hosted at the Rinks Anaheim Ice. It's coming up April 11th, a 3-on-3 tournament that will raise funds for ACC cancer research. Register now at helptgen.org/Casey's Cup.
John, you were talking about Corey Schneider and how good he has been at this in this building this year. You mentioned the 1.83 goals against average that he has got. His record in this building, 14, 11, and 6, and it just points out how little
should be
offense.
so much better than
oh
that,
my
shouldn't it?
goodness. They just can't score enough goals to win games.
And the Devils, 28th in the league. That's third to last. Only two teams score fewer goals a game. They barely score 2 a game themselves, averaging just over 2.1. And I know it's a defensive NHL by today's standards, but you got to have more than that. Nice pass by Lindholm off the stick of Wagner. And you go back to that breakaway pass Boschema put on the tape for Kessler. It started with a great reversal from Hampus Lindholm all the way back behind the Anaheim goal, and it was just a matter of great communication. You could hear Francois yelling at Hampus, and it alleviated pressure and ended up nearly and resulting in an Anaheim goal.
Put the head up all the way with Boschema.
Great outlet again, and it's Perry with a little space. He loses an edge in the Jersey zone. Jelena now looks up, and good hustle coming back as the Ducks in lanes. Now Jelena on the slot off his skate is shot blocked by Getzlaf. Subras along the right boards, works it below the goal line and gets it back from Josephson. I beg your pardon, it's Elias. Patrick Elias, all-time leading scorer in Devils history, with over 400 goals and over 1,000 points. Trying to get it to the net. Harold walks the line, and his shot blocked. Again, it's Getzlaf. He leads all NHL forwards in blocked shots. Not hard to see why on that shift.
You know, and I think for Ryan Getzlaf, ever since he put those plastic protective sheets over top of his skates, John, he's even more adept at getting into those shooting lanes.
Oh, big hit in the corner as Zajac hit Palmieri, who then gets up and continues to battle for the puck. Reversed away by Fowler. Room for Vatanen, who throws it up the glass all the way down. This will be an icing call against the Ducks as the clock now down to 5:43.
We might see a timeout here from Bruce Boudreau. He's checking out the body language of his players. Cam Fowler's trying to kind of taking a peek over at the bench. And I think that's enough for the head coach to ask for the timeout. No. I was wrong. I thought he made the little signal there for a timeout, but he pulled it back.
Camilleri to oppose Kessler, who wins the draw. And Vatanen picks his spot, stretches it up the right side, wide open Palmieri into the Devils zone. Oh boy. They rule Fleischmann offside on the near wing. That'll bring a stoppage of play, and we'll step aside.
There's a good look at Ryan Kessler, right? I was looking back through my notes the other day, John, and remember when Kessler was with the Vancouver Canucks, and in 2009, Bob Clark, the then general manager of the Philadelphia Flyers, tried to steal him away from the Canucks.
Offer sheet.
Yep, the big free agent offer, which the Canucks immediately matched, which was a really good thing financially for Ryan Kessler. But this is the only other team now that he has ever played for. Kessler, that long career with the Canucks, and now a huge, huge part of the Ducks and their hopes to go a long, long way in the postseason.
Errant pass from behind the Anaheim goal as Tutu was hoping for Merrill. And Schneider has to paddle it away back in his own zone. Ducks still in deep on the forecheck with 5 minutes to go in a game that they have a 2-0 lead. Silverberg knocked down by Ruutu and able to, from a prone position, at least push it across the blue line. The rookie Damon Severson moves it away, and Tutu flips it ahead. Gomez is offside as he deflects it into the Anaheim zone. Stay with us immediately following the conclusion of this one here at The Rock in Newark tonight. It's Ducks Live, brought to you by Mazda. Just 4 games left in the regular season when this one is done. And lots to look ahead to. We'll get the reaction from out of the Anaheim locker room as well from this one. Raquel puts it on top of the dasher and in. He gets to it on the near side and again puts it deep. Clock becoming an ally of the Ducks with each passing tick. 4:20 remains. Bernier tips it into the zone, and it's brought right back by Vatanen.
And the Anaheim defense doing a great job holding that blue line. And, they're really standing up well in the neutral zone.
Bernier did not get a touch on it. He claims it was touched by Fowler, but icing is the call for now.
Pretty quick defensive pairing. You got Vatanen and Fowler back there. Those are two guys that can really pressure the puck in the neutral zone because they know their partner has that skating ability to get back once the puck is dumped in. They played well together tonight.
Such a fine line, isn't it, Brian? I mean, the first two games of this trip, the Ducks give up 12 goals. Great pass by Maroon, and it's off the side of the goal from Perry. Puts it back in front. Maroon tips at it, still digging. It's loose. Schneider thought it was under him. Oh, and he made a save.
Schneider had no idea. He was doing the snow angel down there in the goal crease.
It was good enough.
That puck was sitting right in front of his feet, and unfortunately, Pat Maroon could not slam it home.
As I started to say, the fine line, the Ducks gave up 12 goals in the first two games of this road trip. They have surrendered 4. Now 5 as Green's shot is redirected in.
That's a smart shot by Andy Green. Green picks his head up, and it's a shot pass that is drilled along the ice. And watch the redirect in front of the net right there by Zubras. He gets a touch on it, but it's the play by Green. Head up all the way, spots Zubras. No chance for Gibson, and the Devils are right back in this game.
Just the 4th of the year for Zubras, Brian. I thought Zubras has had a real good game tonight.
Yeah, he has.
He's been engaged, very physical, active on the forecheck. He's, as you mentioned, a big body who can do that regardless of the opponent, and he gets rewarded.
36 years old, but I've been impressed with the fact that he's got some jump in his step.
I don't know. Are they reviewing? They're reviewing this goal, so
It may have gone in off the skate of Zubras, but it would have to be a distinct kicking motion. The call on the ice was goal.
it was a fairly quick review.
No, we're hearing now that they wanted to make sure when Corey Schneider was down on his wallet whether or not the puck may have crossed the line at the opposite end.
Boy, would that have changed the emotion in this building had that been the case, because I don't think too many of the faithful here at the Prudential Center had any idea what they were looking at. The Ducks hit a post. It looked like behind Schneider, and then as you mentioned, Brian, that puck was laying in front of Schneider, and he had no idea for a while. So it's now a 2-1 hockey game with just over 3 minutes to go as Zubras, with his 4th of the season, from Green, has made it interesting down the stretch. And a nice outlet handled at center by Kessler, who makes sure, instead of trying to make an offensive play, he had a fluttering puck, he settled it and just made sure, was able to find Fleischmann, who got it deep. That was just the 3rd Devils shot on goal this period. And here they come again. Camilleri had it chopped off his stick, and Silverberg is able to lift it back to center.
That's a nice little move by Camilleri. Little bank pass off the boards to himself.
Now Silverberg gets a piece of the outlet pass, but Gomez chases up the near side, only had it chopped back. Good play by Fowler. Thompson will pressure Severson, who slides it over for Jelena. 2:15 to go in the game. Again, Silverberg getting in a passing lane. Fowler steps up. It's deflected deep, and Vatanen hurries it around the boards. Jelena fired it right back through the slot. Nobody home for the Devils. And Cogliano brushes it to center. Spinning with it is Getzlaf, who makes sure as he finds the right angle to lift it in. We'll keep an eye on Corey Schneider here as the game clock now winds down to 1:50.
And I can't help but think, you have Anaheim that leads the NHL in 1-goal victories. And then this is almost what I would call good practice. I don't mean to discount what the Devils have done here by coming back, but from a Ducks perspective, this is about continuing what they've been able to do all season and protect leads.
Schneider out of the net. The 6th attacker on for the Devils as Kessler, with a good second effort a moment ago, just able to get it out of the zone. Wisniewski winds it around. Kessler comes over to support, can't get it out up the wall. Fired on net, and Gibson covers up with just a minute. Well, the clock's still rolling. The clock rolled for like 4 seconds after that.
They'll fix that. Here's what Pat Maroon had asked for. He thought maybe that deflected puck that went off the post had actually crossed the line. It did not. And then later on, Corey Perry had an opportunity down low. That was the one he just kind of threw. The rebound that was redirected, it's off the inside of the post. Good look from the overhead camera. Never crosses the line. Bounces up in the air and right back between the wickets of Schneider. And that was the Snow Angel that he then got away with, as Pat Maroon could not get his stick free to slam it home.
The Devils are going to use their timeout here. They did put the time back on the clock. 1:14 remains in the game. A face-off upcoming in the Anaheim zone. And Bruce Boudreau realizes his Chargers have to just bear down for 74 more seconds, and they can have themselves a winning road trip.
You see Adam Oates, assistant coach with New Jersey, over there with the dry erase board, diagramming a play for the troops. I was talking to Boudreau about what a luxury it is to have Kessler this season. In situations like this, we'll see both Kessler and Getzlaf. Kessler, as the #1 faceoff man, has won 11 of 17 draws tonight. And a pretty good second option for Boudreau if he can send Getzlaf into the mix.
The net is empty at the other end. 1:14 to play. 2-1 Ducks. And Zajac wins the draw. Elias brushes it back. Camilleri fires it right back into the fray in the circle, and Silverberg gets to it. And a bad break for him. He's frustrated. He tried to chip it up the boards. Extra large benches here in New Jersey. They go well into the offensive zone, so that puck easily climbed up the boards and went into the Anaheim bench.
Yeah, you're right. That's a good point. A little different. Not something that is not standardized from building to building.
There are some buildings where the bench ends right at the blue line. You can see they go on here another 15 feet into the offensive zone.
I think the linesman is in some distress at the bottom of your screen, and that's what the little bit of a delay is.
Sean Marin trying to shake it off as the Ducks now win the face-off, and they throw it into the crowd. Under pressure was Lindholm, and he throws it over the glass. The Devils are going to get a power play with 1:02 remaining.
Well, he was about to get rocked.
Penalty, number 47, 2 minutes per play game.
And this is what happens when you are feeling the heat. You know you're going to get clocked. You take your eye off the puck for a split second. Here comes the hit. And Lindholm makes a mistake. He'll sit and watch nervously for the final 1:02.
Anaheim can now ice the puck without any consequence, if you will, and the net stays empty at the other end. It's a 6-on-4 Jersey power play. Camilleri, the point man, pushes it ahead. Fumbled by Elias. He has it again, throws it in front, tipped by Bernier, and ends up in the far corner. Off the post. Gomez with a rare shot, and he surprised Gibson. Puts it down low, it comes across. Elias blocked by Fowler. Back to the line, Camilleri, 35 seconds left. Elias. High slot, Shelena blocked again. It comes across. It was Kessler who got in the way. Right through the crease off the stick of Camilleri. Jelena tees another one up. Gomez tries to throw it into the middle. Now back to Jelena, near circle. It's Camilleri who had to take it off the skate. 15 seconds left. Camilleri teed up, deflected wide. Diving effort by Kessler, sweeps it to the far boards. Bushman went over and couldn't get to it as he was knocked off balance. Right to the side of that. Bernier tips it off the side of the goal. And that's going to do it. The Ducks play the last 62 seconds short-handed. And John Gibson holds the fort. That's why he's tonight's Land Rover player of the game.
They're all just sucking air on the ice right now. Gibson chief among them. Francois Beauchemin, boy, what a battle at the top of the goal crease late in the game. Gibson makes a couple of saves. He had a couple of pipes that worked in his favor. What a gutsy, gritty effort. And he responds. I said it would be interesting to watch John Gibson after Frederick Anderson had pitched a couple of great games. He gets a little bit of a break, big break, as Gomez looked like he had that top corner pick that's off the crossbar. It stays out. Terrific goaltending performance, and the Ducks win the final 3 games on this road trip.
I said it before, Gomez is a pass first, pass second, pass third guy, and he surprised everybody. Took a shot, but it went off the plumbing, and Gibson and the Ducks hang on in New Jersey. They win the last 3 games of the road trip. Now have 105 points on the season as they defeat the Devils at the Rock by a final score of 2-1. Stay with us. Much more to come from Newark. Ducks Live is next.